Hello. Well, I hope you're having a good day. I was going over a concept. First of all, I'm not a trained professional. I don't have a degree, but I have some life experience. I've dealt with some situations that I believe this will be relevant information for, uh, again, in a few use cases about how to overcome narcissism. I think, again, maybe not in all cases, but I think that narcissism it comes from a place of being hurt, potentially. I don't know always what does that. Sometimes nature and nurture, too much coddling or not enough. And there's such a range of what people experience. So, uh, the book Healing the Shame That Binds You turned me on to understanding what shame is and how it makes you feel broken. And whatever, like if we're talking about the root of, if we want to pull on a string, the sweater of, or that's attached to the heartstring, the authentic us before we were needing the narcissistic defense mechanisms, which had to make us look really good because it had to be the polar opposite of how bad we felt at our worst when we were unprotected. Someone was hurting us, whatever that hurt was like. It can be very, very dark, very hard to face. So in order to not face that, we have to build up this alter ego that supposedly doesn't have any shame. They can do whatever they want, maybe. More invincible than feeling broken and powerless, which there's some health in having that range of not staying in the hurt part. But sometimes when we are pushing down the shame and not understanding it, we can accidentally be a hurt person hurting people, because narcissism isn't able to have empathy. They can't feel that shame. They've had to push it down because it turned into survival mode, or they were pushed past what they felt like survival was or should have been. So then they go into I can't feel for other people because that would remind me of my feelings of feeling powerless, and that stuff is scary. That's survival mode. So the triggers can line up, and it props up, all the triggers prop up the narcissism. And then you've got each time those are hit, it could be regular feedback like, this isn't working for me, and that's mutual. But saying this isn't working for me turns into, now you're the bad guy and you can't have expectations or you're emotionally abusive. I'm speaking from experience. And when many of my needs or my expression of expectations were totally normal, I didn't know enough at the time to be able to not be gaslit. So then it made it extremely difficult. If I had the knowledge, I would have been able to I've got a shield, you can't hit me with that one, that's bullcrap. And so with experience, some of this stuff, it's useful to know what you're dealing with, so that you understand when someone's fighting back, you put them into survival mode, and so they're coming at you because they don't want to go back to that place, there's an amount of that that's healthy. The thing is it's over proportionate to many of the situations. And again, I think that some ways that these play out, like in the Healing the Shame That Binds You book, it talks about how sometimes people that are shame-based, that are highly successful, that have that, it might not always manifest as narcissism even, but they're highly successful. It's because they don't want to have the shame stuff. That's still what pushes it. So it's interesting that if you can shine a light on the shame, understand what it is, heal it, you can be highly successful, and it doesn't have to be a motive of shame. That isn't what props it up, because the thing is when you get down, or like, for instance, someone that is like, well, I don't like my life right now, and I'm going to blame my situation, other people. It's all their fault. Because they're human too, and obviously that's abusive. And it's everybody else, but it's not me. And I don't want to be told I don't want to be told what to do or not to do. So if that happens, everyone wants to be happy. Adler, NLP, Tony Robbins, that whole, they talk about the two main motives is to avoid pain and to get pleasure. So if you're unhappy at the moment and you have people and things to blame, you're trying to restructure. You're trying to have happiness, which isn't a bad goal. It just is, sometimes if people are using narcissistic, if they haven't healed the shame and they're going after pleasure and somebody's in the way, they're going to remove them to go after the pleasure so they can have a happy life. And that might not actually be they say that when you leave one relationship, you take your baggage to the next. Dealing with the shame and healing you gets you back to that heartstring and your original self that didn't have the pain, that didn't have the console and being triggered into. It takes a lot of energy. It's very difficult psychologically. The self-deception, you have to keep telling you, no, I don't feel, that's for sissies, or that's for whatever that's for weak people. And so you're beating the crap out of that hurt you that dealt with really difficult things. And if you can get to that, one way or the other, it seems that like people can use sex, drugs, all these things to find the pleasure or to numb the shame or numb the pain. But if they don't understand what they're doing, unconsciously they can be like destroying. I actually found, I don't remember which one it is, if it's Marxism or socialism, one of those two, the like behind it, there's a concept called destructionism, where you just have to destroy everything that there is in order to rebuild your utopia. And like, that's kind of where like, well, the world is effed and I can't handle all the world. So obviously everyone else is the ones of the problem. And my narcissistic self is obviously wise enough because I dealt with all these hard things. So I know how to destroy things right and then build them up right. And like, so if you're lacking empathy for others, you lack it for yourself. And you might go on breakneck and like hurt yourself and do things that aren't actually for your highest good, your highest benefit, your most long-term. Now, that with judgment aside and like whatever your beliefs are, like there are things that help people to be successful and things that don't help them to be successful. So as far as like some things can be taken too far, but empathy is always good for relationships. It's always good for yourself. Your relationship with yourself is the one that's going to last the longest no matter what. You're always going to live with yourself. And if you're always packing around all that baggage of things that caused you shame that you haven't figured out how to understand, and then you created all the defense mechanisms of narcissism to make yourself look good, anybody pokes a hole in that, like, holy crap, it just messes you up. I mean, but you can't let them know that because that's survival mode stuff, that's powerless stuff. So some of these things it's unfortunate because we got pushed into it. Our personality wouldn't have some of the things if we felt like things were safe, if we felt like the world was safe. But I think we have to stop blaming, because you create oftentimes what you believe, you project. So like if anybody does anything imperfect, then they could be the same as the original, whatever. I mean, I dealt with some really rough things, and my parents did too. I'm not going to talk about everybody's stuff, but I mean, that stuff leaves a hole where something happy should have been, um, or just things that, being a kid for longer, like not knowing certain things, like just worrying about kid stuff. Anyways, I don't want to go into it too deep, too dark, but there are, some of this stuff, whether it's from being with someone that had some abuse, I don't know to what degree. I don't know what was conscious or unconscious, and they have since made some very like, I'll leave their stuff out of everybody's business too, but there's been some choices, and I think it's just that trying to destroy what's unhappy to build back your utopia. And I don't think there's ever a utopia. I mean, again, utopia isn't actually sustainable. It's not your day to day. That's real. If you OD on, if you're getting your euphoria from drugs, you eventually OD on that stuff. I think having a range, I think you should say, having boundaries is okay. Like, I'm not going to have this low of a low, but having a low and having the emotional regulation, because you've healed the shame, you've healed the survival mode, you're not being triggered so much. You know that you have power, but you can also have empathy for the self that was hurt. And then that means you can extend that olive branch to everybody else, and you can realize that they have pain too, and that they need love and support. So anyways, that I hope that is something that maybe it's not extensive. You could go on forever. The book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. There's another one about how to fix your marriage without talking about it, I think is what the title is. Some of that has some of that stuff in it too. That's like, it's so cool sometimes talking for people is good. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's shame inducing. But again, there's the shame, studying shame, shadow work, because that helps figure out what the motive of seeking pleasure is, when basically pleasure is just goal oriented. It's self-interest. Those are good things. I think though that you can go on the breakneck that can be more destructive and leaves a lot of people in the wake, or you can have your cake and eat it too, where you do the hard work of looking at what is the root cause of the narcissistic defense mechanisms, and healing through that, therapeutically healing through shame. Understanding it is sometimes like the thing. Like, some people just don't know that that's there, or that there's a root cause for things, and it's so hard to, because narcissism seems like a buzzword. It's so bad, like to concern ourselves with, like, oh, well, I might have another flaw. Like, that's part of what shame is I'm a flawed person instead of I make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. That's part of learning. And there's some selfishness in things, like there are some ideals, and sometimes things don't always line up. So there has to be boundaries, I think, if it's in relationships. But I mean, at least people need to be able to choose what they're being a part of or not, or where their boundary is. And I think that's healthy for autonomy, everybody to have their autonomy. And there are things that are deal breakers. So, but I think the best case, if there's some rebuilding that needs to be done, it is possible that it's internal, that you work through the shame, you recognize that that's the connection, and be okay. Like, it's okay that is, like, because defense mechanisms are they keep you alive. There's a purpose for it. But to always be living on the defense is actually just you covertly always in fight or flight. And I don't think that's any way to live. I don't think that ends up, once you deal with the shame and then you rebuild your inner game and you find yourself without potentially destructive behaviors. Yes, healthy ranges of pleasure, but they won't be to try to erase the shame. It's just because you can never have enough of too much of something. Like you can just keep glutton, and I mean, pick a vice, a thing, even a thing that can seem harmless, into like just obsession, just for pleasure, just to make the shame and the pain and the heartache go down and go away without dealing with it. It's just festering mess it's like lipstick on a pig. It's putting stuff on the outside while the inside just feels just a mess. So I'll end there. I just think that doing something to discover and be okay with, rest with, that like there was a time where we were powerless and things weren't handled right. They weren't in our best interest. And it doesn't have to affect the now. It doesn't have to be destructive for us or others. And get back to feeling. Understand. Number one is understand. And then some feeling. And if you can connect the dots of how that shame created defense mechanisms, and you can heal the shame, the defense mechanisms will definitely subside. Their triggers won't be so high. The structure of your life starts coming together. You do things for healthy ranges of pleasure because it doesn't have to be exaggerated, because it's the other, when we're younger and we don't have emotional regulation, some of the situations, as bad as they are, could be stuck. And not that they are not actually horrific in instances, but I think that as you mature, you have that empathy for yourself that dealt with the thing that you dealt with, and recognize, that was messed up. Somebody should have been taking care of them. That the little me, and not just like one. It's how many ways, like so many ways that yourself should have been taken care of. I think it helps you to have that update and then be that protection in a non-shame based way, and in again, that is more of a inside out. You have something to give because you're not constantly having to feed that shame of that, the sorrow, how that situation that you were in or constantly in made you feel horrible, whatever version of horrible that was. So I will put in the description that this could be had to give trigger warnings, but find a professional that knows more about shame and can help with that. A lot of times we're trying to get suffering to stop, and it can have all kinds of different destructive things, but don't be destructive. Like most things, if you give them time and learning, again, the understanding, the emotional intelligence that comes with understanding, I mean, a lot of this stuff melts away, and then it's more functional. It's not so draining, and you can see yourself and others in a totally different light. But it has to start with your survival is really important. You just don't want to think that you're gonna go and build this utopia that just is full of false. Then you just land in the same place, needing to deal with the shame, and maybe it's much worse. Sometimes that's how it works, but trying to save destruction is not fun for so many reasons. So if you go the therapy route, you got to get real, you got to get honest, and it can be challenging, but it's doable. There's some things that when you see the path through it, and man, it's you like, how could people know so much? That's where it ends up getting you to. So good luck, and be studious, but take care of yourself while you're learning through this stuff. It's challenging. Good luck. Have a good one.